Good evening, it's Patriot Smoothie at the Ottawa Courthouse at the end of day 18 of the trial of Tamara, Lich and Chris Barber. When I last spoke to you around lunchtime, I told you about some things with Paul Jorgensen, but I didn't mention this one interesting fact. As we were having testimony this morning, an alarm started to sound in the building. It was a fire alarm of some sort. The judge was very calm, said that it happened from time to time in this building, and that if people wanted to evacuate, they could. Some people at that time left the courthouse. And then we just sat there with this thing going off, and I'd say about 3 or 4 minutes later, this was somewhere around 12 noon, the alarm tone changed. The judge announced, this is the part that we typically hear an announcement on what to do next. And at that point, an Ottawa police officer came into the courtroom and said that we are in fact evacuating the court. So we left, and then that's when you saw my video with the fire department and all the different things that were happening here outside. We did eventually go back to court after the lunch break. And when we came back, a few things I want to mention. I didn't mention this in my other videos about Mr. Jorgensen, but he was asked if he was aware of the lawsuit, and he is. And he was asked if he had taken steps without describing them to participate in the lawsuit, and he has, though there was quite a back and forth with him and defense counsel on that questioning. Typically, as there was with all of the questions, there's usually quite a worded answer given by Mr. Jorgensen to the questions he's asked. So he basically said, you know, what would you define as taking steps to participate and so on and so forth. Thought that was kind of interesting, but he was later clarified again. He asked by Eunice, so that was asked by Mr. Granger. Eunice, when she began her cross before the fire alarm this morning, said, have you taken steps to exclude yourself from the lawsuit? He answered, well, no, I haven't. So there was that. And then I found it interesting that yesterday he described the phenomenon of rolling coal. We heard about the fireworks and everything else, but he described the rolling coal, and he said that he knew what rolling coal was because he's seen it before and he read the Wikipedia page on it. And I'm fairly certain with some degree of confidence that he described it as the modification to a diesel engine, which is correct to my knowledge, where coal is injected into the engine to produce a thick, black, putrid, caustic cloud of smoke. Now, he's got a fairly large vocabulary, certainly compared to some of the witnesses we've heard. He's clearly very well spoken. He's got a rotund array of words that he uses to express himself, and typically quite a few of them when he's answering questions. But I just found that little description of rolling coal interesting as one of the nuisances he was experiencing during the convoy. Next came the Crown re-examination. Now, this is an opportunity for the Crown to ask some questions based on things that are said during cross-examination. But before we circle into that, Eunice asked Mr. Jorgensen about his food insecurity. And then she pointed out that there is a market very close to where he lives, I believe it's called JJ's, and asked him if he ever attempted to go there or if he was aware that it was open during the protest. And he said, it's typically open 24/7, and it was taken by, like, there was convoyers in there, so he avoided JJ's Market plus previous experiences, so he did not go there. But he didn't know if it was open 24/7, more or less is what he said. So Eunice asked him, well, how do you know it's not open 24/7 if you avoided the area? He even described the path he would take in his car to stay away from that area, that it was out of the way, to not be near that area of the protesters. So how would he know that if he didn't go? He basically said, well, it's typically open 24/7. We didn't really get any further with that. So that was interesting. Of course, in other cross-examinations, I think Granger asking him about the supermarket down at Lansdowne, and he said the thing about not having a big enough bag and it being a really far walk. So the point of those cross-examinations was that when he claims that he had food insecurity, to me it seems as if they were trying to say that there were other options that he didn't maybe pursue at the time to remedy that situation. He also talked about different places, I guess, in the Glebe or elsewhere, but Isabella maybe, but certainly not just the one option, the two options he testified about, and that was an interesting line of questioning concerning that food insecurity issue he raised. Now, when we got into re-examination, that's where it got really interesting, because again, re-examination is an opportunity, as I understand, for the Crown to basically just clarify a couple things that came up on the defense's cross-examination, and typically after that, they get the last word, so the defense doesn't get to cross-examine again. And typically it's been very straightforward. You remember when the defense counsel asked you this, what were you meaning by that, so on. And there's typically not a lot of new information added. And you have to recall that during this period of cross-examination, there's been a lot of questions about different exchanges that Mr. Jorgensen has had with individuals. So there's been opportunities to add information. Now, we know about the one incident he's described in detail, the one where there was a group of people walking down a sidewalk, and then he and his partner were then walking the other way on the sidewalk, I believe he testified 50 50 meters to the east of Kent, and they were walking to the west. So as they were walking, they opposed each other. They were walking in opposite directions. And these people were apparently across the road, but some of them may be spilling off onto the road. But as they got closer, they all went onto the sidewalk, and basically he testified that they encircled him and they said something along the line of, "Oh, you're wearing a mask." And at that point, Mr. Jurgensen felt unsafe, pushed one of the bullies, as he called them, out of the way and proceeded to continue eastwards. So we heard about that exchange, and there was certainly opportunity to talk about other exchanges or interactions that had happened. But on re-examination, he was asked, the first thing he was asked was, so keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. There was a lot of opportunity to add information. So on the first re-examination question, the Crown asked him if he remembered when Mr. Granger asked him about why he didn't speak to the people who were blocking his exit ramp. And he testified that he didn't speak to them because they weren't amicable. They weren't amicable. No, I don't believe that's the word. They weren't amenable to his condition. They weren't agreeable to it. So they wouldn't have cared if he asked them to move. He didn't want to talk to them, is basically what he said. And that even if somebody did want to move, or if he did talk to them and they did get somewhere, that person would have been blocked in because, as he said, it's chock-a-block full where he lived on Kent. And it would basically be a chain reaction. The front person would have to move out. And if there was even one person not in a car, then the whole thing would fall apart and it would be useless. So he never talked to anyone. That's what he said on re-examination, why he didn't talk to anyone. He was given that opportunity. Now, he was also asked to describe the Bank Street, because he testified that he avoided Bank Street because he felt it was deeply unpleasant, and he was asked to explain why he felt that. He said that on more than one occasion, probably, he bumped shoulders with people in an unpleasant manner, that people were accosting him. And the thing that I found to be particularly that stood out to me, remember that he testified yesterday about an ambulance response time. I believe it was him who testified. No, sorry, it was Zexy Lee. But he was asked about these things. Like, he was asked about numerous opportunities on defense and on Crown examination, but he saw fit to add the information that on Old Ottawa South on Bank Street, at some point during the demonstration, he testified on re-examination that there was an individual who was having an overdose, and that the protesters blocked emergency services from reaching that person, and that they did not care that that person was, quote, dying. He entered that on re-examination. Now, I'm really interested as to know why the defense at this point did not interject, because this was I don't know if this is outside the scope of what's allowed on re-examination. I'm not a lawyer, but it seemed like a lot of new information at the very end, and quite intense information. If you're basically saying that they didn't care that a person was dying, and they were blocking emergency services from reaching a person who was dying. So I'm curious as to what the defense is thinking was here, but I think they feel confident with the questions they've asked this witness. I think they did really well on cross-examination, as per usual. And the judge followed up by saying something along the lines of, unfortunately, people overdosing in Ottawa have nothing to do with the convoy. So she said that. That was an interesting thing, that there was additional, he was asked multiple times about encounters he had with protesters. He never mentioned these bumps with people on Bank Street that he saw fit to mention on re-examination. And he certainly never mentioned this poor person who was having a medical emergency, overdosing, to his opinion. I don't know how he knew that, how he knew that the person was, quote, dying. That was never, no one asked that, so we don't know. But that's what he testified in re-examination. Someone was dying, convoy was blocking emergency services from getting to that person, and that they didn't care that that person was dying from an overdose. So that's quite extreme. That's quite the statement. It's quite the statement, and it's sad that wasn't subjected to any kind of additional scrutiny. But at that point, what could you do? I'm not worried about it. I think the defense did a phenomenal job. It's just very unusual to be listening to things like that at that point in the ceremony, in the testimony. Then finally, the last question he was asked on re-examination was about the blockade, the blockade, as the defense has called it. The Crown made mention that it was the defense calling it the Elgin blockade. The defense was calling it the Elgin blockade, not the Crown. So what did you mean? Like, what was your experience there? And he talked about the sign he was wearing. Like, he said he was wearing, he was asked about the question. Granger asked him about what did he mean when he said that the police didn't threaten to arrest him. So the witness, he described that the police got out of their vehicle at this so-called blockade, put on their gloves, which he takes it to mean that they're about to touch somebody, and that they walk towards him sort of in a line with some swagger of some sort. That's the word he used, with swagger. And then they talk to him. He was not himself threatened with arrest, but he can't speak to if anyone else was.
It was his blockade.
No, it was not his. He was just participating.
Okay.
He was just participating, so he was
not
going
convoy
to another,
related.
We
though.
talked about this.
Yeah.
He was counter-protesting by blocking traffic, as we talked about in the lunch video. Go watch that. And at that point, he was originally heading to Billings Bridge. He decided not to go to Billings Bridge. Instead, he just stopped at Elgin near the Nature Museum and did a block of traffic there. And at that point, like I said, he said the police never threatened him with arrest. He doesn't know if anyone else was threatened with arrest, but they put on their gloves and they walked to him with some swagger. And if you want to hear more about that testimony, go to the lunch video and watch that from today, day 18 lunch summary. It'll be in there. But what I want to focus on is he also testified that there was these signs there, that he put a sign on. He didn't put much thought into it. I think he said a few seconds of thought, being handed out by, quote, a veteran who's counter-protesting a lot. I don't know what that means or who it refers to. And he just saw a sign, he liked to put it on. Because he was asked by Eunice on cross-examination, we watched brief body cam footage from the so-called Battle of Billings Bridge counter-protests that happened on February 13th here in Ottawa, where a group of cars were held, convoy cars were held for hours by a group of angry residents. Not to say that there wasn't residents who supported those people and this entire protest, but they were held there. And in that, we saw a sign that said something. Mr. Jurgensen has never seen that sign before, and that sign was not at the demonstration he was participating at, the blockade of traffic, as the defense calls it, as the Crown put it, at the Elgin Street location. So that sign wasn't there. And they were also chanting in this police body cam video. They were chanting, "Our flag, not your flag." He was asked if there was a similar type of chant happening at Elgin Street, and he said no, there wasn't. So that was interesting re-examination. I'm just trying to think if there's anything I missed, and at the witness's name, I stumbled on it earlier. It's Paul Jorgensen again, so I apologize. There's so much information. Thanks again for watching every day, keeping current. If you want the minutia of details, again, the best place to get it is on my X profile. You're going to get the breakdown. There's a tremendous amount of information. So if you're interested, my X account /RealBlend, that's the place to go. You're going to find all the details you could ever want there. From Ottawa, the introduction of such tremendous amounts of information on re-examination, the defense not objecting to it. I think the defense has made a strong case so far, that they're handling the Crown's case, I should say, very well. And I feel like they have some confidence in this. I don't know what a purpose and objection could have done at that point, but we did get some new some information that we didn't know of before on re-examination concerning the shoulder bumping on Bank Street that he said he had, the several situations, as well as the individual who was, quote, dying, who convoy was apathetic to and blocking emergency services for, which is quite the testimony.
Free Tamara Lich!
For sure, man, for sure. Absolutely, free Tamara Lich. And then at the end, the last thing we did for the day, there was an application that the Crown put forward from a PLT officer, the main PLT officer who's had the most communication with Mr. Chris Barber. And the application is basically for her to testify via Zoom. She's got a young child, and the judge did not agree with that. The judge said that she's had her children in the courthouse. Councillor Magus, Miss Magus rose, Diane Magus, and said that she breastfed 5 of her children in this courtroom. The judge, again, Justice Perkins McVeigh, saying that she's cared for her young children. She said that she worked full time when she had a 4-year-old. So basically, the judge said something along the lines of 161 Elgin is a wonderful place, or something. She dismissed that application. It would have created other issues for the defense to be able to provide their case accurately. There could have been issues with the bandwidth on the Zoom for giving the witness any kind of evidence, showing them videos and pictures. It's really important to Magus's defense, to Chris Barber's defense, that particular PLT officer be here. So that was an issue we discussed after the re-examination, the dismissal of the Paul Jurgensen. And then we did have PLT officer Isabella Sear come back briefly, but she then left as quick as she came in. There's some timing issues there that they were working out, but that's basically it today from Ottawa. I'm Patriot Smoothie. Thanks for watching.